Good afternoon, and welcome to the Sustainability Hour with Mira and Maggie. I'm Mira, that's Maggie, and today we're going to talk about my vision and hopefully help to make it yours as well of an eco park. And I just want to give you a little bit of my story and what got me into sustainability in the first place. And I was looking for my sense of purpose. And I realized that every time I thought about what we were doing to the planet, it broke my heart. And literally, I couldn't think about the planet without being overcome by tears. And so I realized that I had to do something. And I had such a deep sense of hopelessness around it. And it was such an intense despair, actually, that I couldn't bear it. As a result, I had to do something. And I came up with this vision of what I'm calling so far the EcoPark. And I'm hoping that you guys who are joining today will help to come up with a name for this venture. But the EcoPark, just to share a notion of what it is this fantastical, phantasmagorical, wondrous place that is as enchanting and inspiring as Disney or Epcot or beyond, and is epitomized by sustainable technologies and practices, kind of like a Academy of Natural Science for sustainability, but beyond, where people can come and learn how to do all kinds of alternative building and learn all kinds of things about different ways to grow food. And I imagine all these different parts, which we're going to dig into today, because I know that the collective mind is more creative than my mind alone. And I believe that more magic can happen when we put ourselves in the flow of things. So I invite you to join me on this journey and to involve yourselves and imagine with me what the possibilities are for this thing. And I've spoken about it a little, but I want to dig in a little more deeply. And I can tell you that when I recently had the occasion to go to a Joe Dispenza week-long retreat, the meditation retreat, and it's really focused on manifesting. I'll just say it that way. It's transformational and focused on accessing the field of possibility and bringing forward our dreams and visions from that field. So just to back up a little bit, I was giving you my story. I had this vision of the EcoPark, and when I chose it, and it first chose me and then I chose it, I didn't know anything about sustainability, really. I mean, I didn't even know much about recycling at that time, I have to admit. But I knew that I didn't know. And so that's where the Sustainability Now podcast came from. So if you want to check out our podcast, I've been doing this podcast for a couple of years now with my Sustainability Now business partner, Scott Billy. So if you go to sustainabilitynow.global, or you can go to YouTube and find us there, or you can go to iTunes or wherever else you get your podcasts, and you can listen to us there. But anyway, what I realized is that having a podcast would be a great way to be able to meet the people that are doing the things that I wanted to showcase in this EcoPark. And anyway, when I was at the Joe Dispenza event, I was at breakfast, and this guy came over and sat down next to me because he knew the other person at the table that I was sitting with. And we started talking, and it turns out that he's an eco developer. And the more we talked, the more commonality we had. I shared the vision of the EcoPark, and he has a very, very similar vision. And so we have been talking about this and brainstorming about it a bit, and it's now gaining enough momentum that I feel like I can be participating in an ongoing conversation about what this place is and how it looks and how it feels to be there and what the possibilities are. So if you're here, I'm not seeing anything in the chat yet. So please feel free to engage. This is an exercise in imagining our future. And one of the things that I think is bred out of a lot of us is our imagining and our ability to continually apply our imagination to create new possibilities out of nothing. So the things that I have thought of so far around the EcoPark are based foundationally on a definition of sustainability that incorporates food, energy, housing, waste, water, health, economics, and consciousness. And consciousness is a really, really big part of that. And certainly there are other elements, social justice. There are other elements that are also part of this bigger picture. Now, in conceptualizing this, I was stuck for quite some time with a business plan. Still am a little bit, but my new partner in crime in the EcoPark is being a developer. He's more adept at writing business plans, and we have all these different ideas. So one of the things that I decided to research, because I wanted to get a bit more scope around this thing, a little bit more understanding about how much land we're looking at and how much money we're looking at and what the production looks like, and on and on. And the closest prototype or template that I am aware of to what I want to do, I suppose I could look into a World's Fair, but Disney just makes sense. And I have to confess, I have not yet been to Epcot. And from what I've understood and read, Epcot is probably more the prototype for what I'm like wanting to do. And what I mean by that, and why Disney, is because it's this very, first of all, it's global. Second of all, it's expanded. In other words, it has educational components, it has philanthropic components, it has, I discovered it has a bunch of sustainability components. And so there was this wonderful book that I found and have read and expect to be poring over and learning a bit more, but it's all facts and figures around Disney. It's called Disney by the Numbers. And it talks about how many acres and how much laundry and how many restaurants and how many chefs and how many different kinds of food and how many different exhibits and rides and how much food they give away to less fortunate population locally, and the fact that they have recycling center on site, and on and on. And it gave how much laundry they process. So it gave me a better perspective to be conceptualizing this thing. And it also made me more curious. So, you know, like how, here's a really interesting conversation. Besides the details, for instance, of how many restaurants, or where are we going to get the land, and how much money and how much land, besides the kind of obvious things, the question is, how do you conceptualize this stuff? Like where do you start? And it was very interesting to me to learn that Disney hired a consulting firm to do a financial profile and a whole proposal after bunches of research of all different places throughout the country as to where the optimal location would be for Disney World. And this is all new to me, but my interest in Disney, as I said, is because I'm interested in creating this EcoPark. And as I've been conceptualizing it, of course, it's growing, and it has become more of a plan for a city that has the EcoPark as one of the components of the city, that then the city springs up around this thing. And in looking at Disney, where this came from is the fact that the original Disneyland, I believe, was on 284 acres, or no, maybe it was 100. It was maybe it was 184 acres, but it was a contained area. And what happened is that all these other hotels and restaurants and things grew up around Disney, but not in the same ilk, not of the same vision, you know, so cheesy hotels and things like that. And it became a less than desirable area surrounding the Disney property. And so I think what happened was that they decided, you know what, let's create a whole environment that is this wonderland world. And that's very much what I want to do, is to create this wonderland world that is our future, you know, that's not fantasy, that's actually reality, things that exist and are emergent in terms of how we can truly live a thriving life going forward on the planet with technologies and practices that are sustainable and beautiful and magical and inspiring and life affirming. And so in many, many ways, Disney, because it was such a grand vision, and this is such a grand vision, is the perfect model in so many respects, because it was a visionary project. And so there are sustainable cities. There is a movement to be building sustainable cities. And I'm not just talking about sustainability in terms of a city. So like a city is going to have, first of all, it's going to be driven by practicality. And this is where we get to the consciousness part of sustainability. There are some wonderful examples. You might want, if you're interested in these sustainable cities, I just recently heard of a city called Golden City that I believe is either existing or is being conceptualized and developed in Indonesia, I believe. And there is a city by Toyota in Japan called Woven City. And I know that there is a movement to be rehabilitating cities, to be making them more sustainable. But I think there might even be a visionary city that's a sustainable city in Dubai. I'm not certain. I didn't get to research this before we started talking today. But where do you start? And so Disney provided a context, like a scale in a way, in researching it, because they bought, I think it was 27,400 some acres, which is, I believe, over 43 square miles of property. And they bought up the property in bits and chunks and not under the Disney name, because as soon as people found out that Disney World was going to be built there, all of a sudden land prices skyrocketed. They blew up overnight. It was crazy. But anyway, a good portion of this land that was bought is marshy kind of land. Lots of the land they designated to a preserve, which is really interesting. Little known facts, right? So in my conceptualizing of this EcoPark, originally there's always been an intent to be growing hemp there, because hemp is one of the most transformational, versatile plants on the planet. It can be used for food, it can be used for shelter, it can be used for medicine, it can be used for clothing and to make plastics, like bio-based plastics. It can be used to make fuel. There are tens of thousands of uses for hemp. And so there was always the intention to be growing hemp on part of this property. And most recently, now we're looking at also growing bamboo, because bamboo is a tremendously sustainable material, not to mention plant, obviously, which is pretty remarkable and wonderful, but it can create remarkable building materials along with hemp, and also has great versatility. Nothing compared to hemp, but great versatility. And you can make clothing, fiber, packaging, all kinds of things, flooring, building materials, et cetera, et cetera. So in conceptualizing this, I personally have always been interested in community and a sustainable type community from the time I was a teenager, a long time ago. And the more I read and learned about community, I learned that there was one problem with these alternative communities. And that problem was people. You know, the politics or how rules were going to be made, how laws were going to be made, what kinds of personal politics get played. And so I thought that another way to be able to build a relatively conscious community would be to not focus on the community, but to focus on an access type business, or in this case, the EcoPark, that exemplifies all the things that would make that could be components for a community, but that the community could be able to grow up organically around it. And because there would be people working there, there would be people wanting to lived the way that the EcoPark was being run, you know, that really enjoyed all the features of it. So anyway, what was originally a vision of maybe 200 acres, because actually as a kid, I had this vision of a theme park that was going to be 200 acres. And I had that idea, and it went through all different permutations, and ultimately it became the EcoPark. Well, it may be that the park itself, maybe that'll end up on 200 acres, but now we're going like way beyond that to 1,000 acres or more than 1,000 acres in concept, and maybe actually getting enough acreage to be able to make a city that would be a sustainable city, and have the EcoPark be sort of the anchor technology within that context. And so the question is, what is this thing? I mean, obviously, one of the ways to start is with funding. Well, you can't start getting funded without a vision and potentially without a business plan, right? So then we get to put together the vision. So how do you vision all the components of something like this? One of the ways is to find a template, you know, like, because whatever the theme of the park is, whatever the exhibits of the park are, by looking at something like Disney or like a World's Fair and the planning of these things, one can start looking at what is involved. You know, like, where do you start? You build the bones, you leave the room for things to grow out. For me, when I was conceptualizing this thing, where I started was with the money, like, where's the money come from? And one of the things that is very important to me about this EcoPark is to have it be based in a just and fair economy. And the question is, how do we do that? Because we don't really have a good model for that. And I'm not an economist. So last week, or maybe it was the week before, we saw a TED Talk by Kate Raworth, talking about donut economics. And it's a new economic model that actually incorporates all people, as well as the planet and nature, into the model. And it incorporates the work that women do historically for free in our economy. It incorporates that into the model. It incorporates climate into the model. So it makes sense. It's so interesting to me that we have these economic models. It never occurred to me before my exposure to Kate Raworth's work, but that we have these economic models that don't have anything to do with the real world. And so, or the kind of life or quality of life that people are living. And it have nothing to do with the social interactions and the justice or injustice of things. So I'm not an economist. And so this whole thing is a challenge. But one of the things that I have thought is that I would love to have this park / city have its own coin, that, and it doesn't have to be constrained to the park or city, especially if we start thinking about a cryptocurrency, you know, because then the rest of the world could be using this coin too, and we could be having it be generating something wonderful, and potentially helping to support the EcoPark. I thought of having other anchor industries as part of this big vision. So Bernadette's saying, I heard the vaccine has a microchip. A nurse and a man had a man scan her arm, and it read a number. Is this true? Bernadette, I have no idea. I don't know. I'm not a medical professional. I don't know very much about the science of the vaccines. I have heard over and over there's no microchip. But I'm no authority on this, and this is not the conversation right now. So we're talking about sustainability and vision. So I'm inclined to say you could probably rest easy that there's no microchip in the vaccine. That's okay. That's okay. But like I said, I'm not qualified to answer that question. But I would be really shocked if there were. In any case, we're talking about visioning the future. And when you have a big, vast vision, how do you go about it? And so for me, it started with what kinds of wonderful things would make our future function. And the first thought was housing. You know, like the way that we develop housing right now, if you think about it, it's kind of counterintuitive. We build these boxes that we have to heat and cool, and we have to add light to them, and then we go to the grocery store to buy our food for the most part, et cetera, et cetera. So what if it were possible to grow, to build a home that heats and cools itself, that purifies its own water, that generates its own food, so that isn't tied to a centralized grid, for example. And this is something that is being implemented in some of these futuristic or sustainable cities, where the energy that's generated, the sewage treatment, the way that the buildings are built, the level of insulation, the way that they're facing, the design of the buildings are all optimized to capitalize on the wisdom of nature, to be capitalizing and utilizing the position of the sun, or the contour of the land, or the natural environment, the ability to position a building in such a way that it can heat itself, to add water systems and insulation systems that are natural, so to speak, rather than building these boxes with toxic materials that might be around forever, that off-gas chemicals that are toxic to us. So one of the very first things is to think about building materials, right? And what kinds of buildings, and to teach people how to be able to make these buildings. And cost is another factor. And fossil fuel things is another factor. And so the source of the materials is one thing. The scale is another thing. The amount of land is another thing. The things that we're going to represent. And so, interestingly, in thinking about Disney, and I'm hoping that you're cool with conceptualizing this stuff with me, because I have so many, areas that we can be looking at, like laundry even would be an area, transportation on location is a whole area for conversation. Economy is another huge conversation. Food. So here you've got a sustainable theme park for all intents and purposes, or education center, resource center. It's all those things. And what's the food going to be? Is it going to be vegetarian? Is it going to be vegan? Is it going to be omnivore? What do we do about fast food? Because especially in the States, but I think pretty much around the world, people are very acclimated to being able to get food on the go. And so the question that these are like real big questions. If people, one of the biggest attractions on the Disney property is restaurants. I think that I read that there are over 300 chefs in Disneyland, and it may be Disneyland, it may be all the properties, but I'm going to venture that it's Disney, not Disneyland, Disney World. But what kind of variety of food? I mean, we're acclimated more and more to going to a food court, right? Where there's all this variety of fast food, all different genres of fast food that we can just go around, and I can have Thai and you can have deli, and we can each get what we want and then sit and eat in a food court. So it's been an interesting thought to consider what kinds of foods are we going to have. And another thing that was, and I'd love your feedback around this, you know, like if you're not vegetarian or vegan or eat raw food, would you go to a place where the only eating options were vegetarian or vegan, and where there was raw food and maybe fermentarium, and where there's all kinds of fermented foods and all these different flavors and styles of food, but that's all vegetarian? Would you go there? If you were a meat eater, if there were things, so now this begs the question too, because there are meat substitutes out now that even were being used, I believe, by Burger King, Beyond Meat. I think that was the one, or there's another one besides Beyond Meat. But anyway, they're sourced from plant sources, you know, plant-based protein they are, but they're kind of engineered, you know, to look and taste like meat. And truly not so sustainable necessarily. Just because it's vegetarian doesn't mean it's sustainable, right? Because these products are produced by monocropping, and I don't know that they're certified organic. There may be all kinds of genetic engineering to, like if they have a soy base, there may be genetic engineering to that, or to the beets. Plus the thing itself is kind of engineered, where it's like a Frankenburger, in that they pull all these different parts from different places and make this thing. And I've eaten them, and I haven't eaten meat in years and years and years, and they were good. And they reminded me of what meat would taste like. Being that I haven't eaten meat in forever, I don't know if a meat eater would agree, but I have been told that they would. In any case, is something like that acceptable in the EcoPark? I mean, it is a new technology. It is a product that a lot of people enjoy, and people don't necessarily people think that they're eating healthier when that's not necessarily the case. Plus the packaging on these things, there's a lot of plastic packaging. And this also begs the question with not only food, because how is the food going to come? Is it going to come in bulk? Is it going to come in recyclable containers? Is it going to come in plastic containers? So where, if in any particular place, do we draw the line? This is what has been, it's a challenging thought. And I have no doubt that whatever we choose to do in terms of sustainability, there will be people who will criticize the company, the EcoPark, because it's based on sustainable and something won't be sustainable enough. I guarantee you. And part of the reason that's true is because so many things are not packaged sustainably, right? So even if we're buying bulk, I don't know, bulk something, does that mean, I mean, what if that product that we're purchasing that is part of the foundational running of the organization, what if it's packaged in plastic? You know, what if there's something that how about in the gift store or in the souvenir store, or, you know, do we sell souvenirs? I really want answers from you guys. I would love to hear your ideas about this. You know, if we were going to sell souvenirs, quote unquote, air quotes, what kinds of things might they be? Maybe it would be your own kind of sustainability survival kit where, you know, you have a mess kit, you have a dish and a napkin and some utensils, and so you use that throughout your stay there, and that way there are no disposable plates or cups around, or maybe things are served in these recyclable, and I don't mean actually recyclable, I mean cleanable, refurbishable containers. And maybe there are stations throughout the park where you put your containers for the fast food that you had, and they get collected and sanitized and cleaned. I don't know what, I would love to hear your opinions about this. What do you think? I think that it's a very, very interesting dilemma, because clearly we're not going to be having this environment that is using disposables, because there are disposables that are compostable, but they're usually compostable. Actually, they're usually industrially compostable. So like if you put them in your backyard compost, the compost heap wouldn't reach the temperature to be able to decompose them. So then what? What do we do for beverages? What do we do for meals? What do we do for things like French fries? What are we going to serve them in? I think it's such a fascinating question, because we don't want to have single-use waste. And then the question is, and I don't know the answer to this, if the single-use waste is more efficient. Let's say we had paper hot cups. Okay, I'm not talking about single-use plastic. I'm talking about single-use waste like paper plates and paper cups and napkins, for example, paper napkins. If we had these single-use items, paper towels, then which is more economical? And this is, it's an interesting question. And when I say economical, I'm really considering the cost to the environment, as well as the production price, plus the shipping and the handling, rather than thinking just of the production price. Excuse me. We get to think also of the price of transport, the price of disposal, the price of distribution, all the prices behind the marketing of something. So when we look at, does it make more sense to wash something, to have a collection system established for it, to wash it and to reuse it over and over and over again, or because the price on that might be higher than just making more paper goods. But the thing is, we don't look at the price on the forests, and we don't, that's why we're going to be growing hemp and bamboo. But we don't look at the environmental price typically when we make our cost assessments of things. So obviously that's got to be different. But in thinking about economics, I am listening to an audiobook by Kate Raworth, who is the donut economic, I want to say, genius, inspired artist who developed this concept. One of the things that she talks about is that the way that economies currently run, they're first of all built on endless growth, which isn't possible on a finite planet. But beyond that, she quotes some statistics that I don't have at the ready to quote to you, but she quotes some statistics that demonstrate how again and again and again and again, the rich get richer and the poor get poorer. And it is not directly tied to effort. It is often tied to opportunity. And we know that opportunity is racially skewed in so many ways, right? Like people of color have a whole lot less opportunity. And so the thing is, opportunity begets opportunity. It's not a function of hard work or intelligence necessarily. It's maybe knowing the right people. It's maybe being in the right place at the right time. And then that opportunity propagates outward and creates more opportunity. So if you're fortunate enough to have some kind of windfall, that financial windfall gives you the opportunity to invest in other financial vehicles, which give you the opportunity to invest in other financial vehicles ad infinitum, right? So it just goes on and on and on. And what Kate Raworth proposes is something that is more distributive. So the idea is that instead of certain sectors reaping the benefits from production, for example, and I don't know the intricacies of this well enough to talk about it too much, But rather than this increasingly high castle kind of wealth, that when we start to recognize that that wealth is utilizing a whole bunch of resources that it's not having to pay for, like it's, for instance, the oil and gas companies are not having in any way to be accountable for the pollution that they create, nor are they having in any way to be accountable for the plastic waste they create that has ruined the world for the moment, that is invasive pretty much everywhere throughout the world. And there's no accountability for it. So what if we created an economy where they were accountable? What if we created an economy where they were responsible for clearing up and cleaning up the waste that results from their products? What would that be like? And how do we bring that into this model of a city? And I can already hear people saying, oh my, that's too idealistic. And that's bucking the system. And we can only hope that it's bucking the system, right? Because we need to create new systems. When we have a world where the richest 1% controls more wealth than 99.99% of the rest of humanity, there's something really, really wrong, right? Because those people that have that money have the power to be deciding how things are going to be going forward. They have the power because they can implement pretty much any kind of strategy to be able to achieve that. So I'm wondering, I don't know how engaged you guys are in this EcoPark idea and thinking about what would it look like to build this resort, retreat, conference, education center, art center? What would it take to build this remarkable, majestic place? And what would be the components? If you're interested in this conversation, I can imagine having a different topic related to the EcoPark on different weeks. So for example, today is more talking about the foundation of the EcoPark, but I could imagine having a topic for one of these conversations just being food. And maybe food itself might be too broad, but it would get us starting. It would get us started on bringing this thing into a form that could make it real. So, I'm bringing this to you to ask for your help in breaking it into manageable chunks and creatively coming up with solutions for these questions that I don't know that I would have known to ask. So I get to do a lot more research to be able to discover the right questions to ask, to start beginning to generate some at least temporary ideas about how this can evolve. And I'm finding it very, very exciting, and also just feeling very curious about what kind of financial structure to come up with. And I was talking about the gift store, the souvenirs and such, the sundries. Do we buy things that are packaged in plastic, even if they're things like a bamboo toothbrush with natural bristles, if it's packaged in plastic, do we sell it at the EcoPark? Or do we use our social leverage to only do business with companies that have recyclable material and a nominal use of them at that? So we touched on a few things today. I think that there are a lot of really cool things that people would be interested in from the EcoPark, and certainly this idea of your own take it with you survival kit or mess kit, that has containers that you can go, if you went to a fast food place, you could go with your container and ask them to fill your container. And so, I'm imagining if there were restaurants that you could go and you could have your container, fill your container, eat your food, return your container, and get a new one in exchange. So I wonder if that's a concept. It would be so fun to have your engagement in talking this through. In any case, if nothing else, I welcome you to my imaginings, and I'm so grateful for the opportunity to just sort of talk through a few of these things while we're together. I hope soon to be able to get to a point where I can maybe even share a PowerPoint with you so that you get an idea of the magic of this thing. Because everybody I've told about it pretty much says, oh, I want to go there, and so do I. So we can bring it about together collectively as we intend it to emerge. The more of us that hold this vision, the more likely it is to happen. So I think that's it for today. I really, really, really appreciate you joining me. This is Maggie. I'm Mira. This is the Sustainability Hour with Mira and Maggie. And we go live here on EWN One with the Earth each Wednesday at 1 p.m. Eastern. And it is such a privilege and a joy to spend this time with you. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Until next time.